Psychedelics are like the Swiss Army knife of drugs. They're transformational therapy tools, religious sacraments, productivity hacks, and a fun time all in one. For this reason, if you're interested in using psychedelics, it's important to clarify what your intentions are. Because if your goal is to access the mental health benefits, how you prepare for that experience is very different compared to tripping at a music festival for fun. When done safely, I think these are both equally valid use cases as long as you know what you're getting into. In this video, I'm going to break down what I see as the four main categories of psychedelic use. These are not strict guidelines, and there's significant overlap between these groupings, but the point is to say the psychedelic experience is diverse. So if you're psychedelically curious, my goal is to help you figure out which category you want to explore, how to do so safely, and give you resources to point you in the right direction. The first category is recreational use, which we can define as using psychedelics primarily for fun, novelty, pleasure, or social connection without a deeper framework or long-term intention. Some examples of this might be on a hike, at a party, a music festival, or in your house. The point of recreational use is simply to have a good time and explore what it's like to be in an altered state of consciousness. You might find yourself enamored with beautiful nature or feeling a deep sense of love and connection toward your friends. For many, myself included, recreational use is their first introduction to psychedelics. It can be extremely joyful, fun, and weird, but it's unlikely that it will lead to any long-term benefits or profound insights about your mental or spiritual health. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that if your intention is purely recreational. It's important to note that psychedelic use in any context comes with risks, but with recreational use, the risk can be particularly high, especially for those who are inexperienced. So if you've never tried psychedelics before and you'd like your first experience to be recreational, I highly recommend doing it in the comfort of your house or a safe place in nature where you won't be disturbed. While psychedelics can be enjoyable at a party or concert, being surrounded by strangers and loud music can be pretty overwhelming, especially if you're not familiar with psychedelic states. In terms of other tips, which basically apply to all the other categories, but I'm just going to put them here, have a sober trip sitter with you, preferably someone who is calm and has psychedelic experience. Even the most experienced psychonauts can have difficult moments while tripping. When things get overwhelming, having a calm, supportive person there can make the world of a difference. When you find your trip sitter, whether that's a friend or sibling, I highly recommend they watch this video from Psych to Substance. Know your dose and start low. It's always helpful to do research on what drug you plan to take and the dosing guidelines for that drug. The Reddit thread r/psychedelics can be a great resource for that. Also, starting with a lower dose and adding more later if desired is always a safe bet and won't take away from your experience. Mindset. Psychedelics tend to amplify what's already in your brain. So if you're already in a bad mood going into it, it's likely that psychedelics will make it worse, and that can lead to some serious negative consequences. So if that's the case, it's probably best to postpone your journey for another time when you feel more balanced. Calming practices. When things get overwhelming, it's always great to have calming practices to fall back on. One of the best ones is learning to take deep breaths through your belly, which automatically reduces your body's stress response. Practicing this technique in the days building up to your experience could be a great resource. Lastly, you should be mentally healthy. Recreational use for people with severe mental illness can be extremely dangerous and lead to the worsening of your condition. If you fall under this category, I highly recommend you avoid recreational use until you are in a better place mentally. And this actually brings me to the next category, which is therapeutic use, which we can define as using psychedelics for healing or treating specific mental health conditions in a structured medical environment. This can also be referred to as psychedelic-assisted therapy. You've probably heard about the ongoing research showing that psychedelics, when combined with therapy, can be extremely effective against disorders like depression, addiction, PTSD, and many more. Oftentimes, this happens in three phases. There's preparation, where the patient works with a therapist to prepare for their journey, the journey itself, where the patient takes psychedelics under the supervision of the therapist, and arguably the most important part, integration, where the patient works with the therapist to translate the insights from their journey into lasting life changes. Psychedelic therapy will be the ideal option for people interested in exploring the mental health benefits of psychedelics in a traditional healthcare setting. Additionally, for those with severe mental illness, this will definitely be the safest and best option. Unfortunately, this type of treatment is not yet widely available, but hopefully will be in the next few years. You can check out my previous video where I laid out an approximate timeline. Also, it's likely that psychedelic therapy, like everything in our healthcare system, will be pretty expensive and inaccessible for a lot of people, but I hope I'm wrong in this respect. Lastly, if you're interested in exploring psychedelics in this medical therapeutic context, but don't want to wait a few years for legalization, there is another option in the form of ketamine-assisted therapy. Ketamine is not considered a classical psychedelic the same way we think of shrooms or LSD, but it can be used in a similar therapeutic context, and many people find it really helpful. Personally, I've never tried ketamine therapy, so I can't speak to it too much. But if you're interested in pursuing this route, make sure you don't forget the therapy part of ketamine therapy. You can have really beautiful and insightful experiences on these drugs, but if you fail to integrate them and work with with a therapist to turn these insights into real-life change, the treatment will not be effective. Okay, that was therapeutic psychedelic use, so now let's get into category 3, spiritual, which we can define as using psychedelics within a sacred context, ceremony, or lineage to connect with the divine, access wisdom, or engage in traditional healing. Cultures from around the world have been using psychedelics in spiritual contexts for thousands of years. Oftentimes, these medicines are built into the fabric of their culture and society. Shamans, or indigenous healers, are the ones who facilitate these ceremonies, which might involve rituals, songs, prayer, storytelling, and dance. For these people, psychedelics are not just drugs. They're a fundamental part of their way of life. The plants themselves are members of the community. Increasingly, these indigenous people have been kind enough to share their wisdom with us in the Western world, hence the rise of things like ayahuasca retreats in South America. Oftentimes, when celebrities talk about their life-changing psychedelic experiences, it's at retreats like these. Without a doubt, these celebrity endorsements are helping change the public perception, but it also comes with a downside. More and more Western companies are flocking to these countries in South and Central America to start these luxury retreat centers in a way that doesn't give back or honor the indigenous people who gave us this wisdom. So if you're interested in ceremonial or spiritual psychedelic use, I'd urge you to find a retreat center that is either locally owned or has a good reputation for being sustainable and giving back to the local community. There's nothing inherently wrong with partaking in these ceremonies, but we must make sure to honor the people who are sharing their wisdom with us. The final category is the smallest one and is the overlap between the other three, which we'll describe as intentional use, defined as using psychedelics consciously, skillfully, and deliberately to improve your life without needing a medical diagnosis or religious framework. When I was in college, like many other kids, my first exposure to psychedelics was recreational. But then I began reading more about psychedelic research and this idea that when used in the right context, psychedelics could be profound tools for mental and spiritual growth. It became clear to me that in order to access these benefits, tripping in the woods with my friends, as fun as that was not the way to do so. I became really interested in the protocols they use in psychedelic therapy research and traditional spiritual settings. What makes those use cases so different from recreational use that allows for such healing and growth? Hence began my journey into intentional psychedelic use. Without ever going to an official clinic or spiritual ceremony, psychedelics became a huge part of my life. Using them in both macro and microdosing settings, they became a tool for personal development, emotional growth, self-reflection, and clarity finding. To me, intentional use combines the flexibility of recreational, the science of therapeutic, and the personal meaning-making of spirituality. It's all about using psychedelics skillfully to improve your life in a way that is aligned with your values. At the heart of intentional use is education, developing a deep understanding of how to use these things safely and effectively. One of the best books I would recommend for this is the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, which teaches you how to have more insightful and introspective journeys at home. Additionally, Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, is a great Psychedelic History 101 crash course. In terms of microdosing, whether that's to boost productivity or mood, I found that r/microdosing on Reddit can be a great resource to see how other people are doing it. Also, given the increasing popularity and acceptance of psychedelics, intentional use doesn't have to be a solo endeavor. In places like Oregon and Colorado, there are legal mushroom retreat centers that don't come from a specific spiritual background, but honor the intersection of indigenous wisdom with modern science. Additionally, many people find it helpful to work with a coach or guide. These coaches aren't therapists and they aren't shamans either, but oftentimes they are well versed in Western therapeutic techniques and ancient wisdom. Coaches can help create a more defined structure around your psychedelic experience. Many times, what people will find is that you can have a really spiritually insightful and profound experience with psychedelics on your own, but turning that into real-life changes, aka integrating, is the hard part. Good coaches and guides can help you do so and translate insights into action. If you're interested in finding a coach, websites like Psychedelic Passage and the Psychedelic Coaching Institute can put you in touch with someone. It's really important to thoroughly vet your coach and ensure you feel a strong connection, trust, and alignment on values. Additionally, to support integration, check out if your city has a psychedelic community group. Just being around like-minded people who understand what you're going through can be so helpful and help you process your experiences more effectively. The last point here on intentional psychedelic use is that it's not for everyone. Like I stated before, psychedelics can carry significant risks. So I do believe self-guided exploration should be reserved for individuals who are mentally and emotionally regulated without any severe mental health disorders. I think it works particularly well when people are already committed to their personal growth and development. That way, psychedelics can be an additional tool in their toolkit alongside things like exercise, yoga, meditation, breathwork, journaling, eating well, and whatever else. Hopefully you find these categories helpful to think about, but I can't emphasize enough that there is significant overlap between them all. Realistically, if someone receives psychedelic treatment for depression in a medical clinic, it's likely that they might have a spiritual experience, and that spiritual experience is what creates the healing. In the same way, someone who takes MDMA at a music festival can also have a really spiritual time. And sometimes just taking mushrooms in the woods can be really helpful for our mental health. health. That's the crazy thing about psychedelics. These experiences can be both unpredictable and really similar at the same time. So if you're interested in psychedelic use, my recommendation is to really think about why. If it's purely recreational, then that's great. Be safe, but don't expect any profound life changes. If you're looking for mental health treatment, psychedelic-assisted therapy will be a great option. If you're interested in traditional healing, check out those spiritual retreat centers, but make sure you're giving back to the communities that are sharing their wisdom with you. And if you're interested in using psychedelics as a deliberate tool for personal growth, make sure you educate yourself. Treat psychedelics with intention, skill, and care. And don't be afraid to seek help from professionals and community groups. Know the risks, know your intentions, and happy tripping.